Are you ready to become unbreakable? This world is full of so much stress, so many shitty, unpredictable situations that we really don't have any control over. But we do have control over one thing, and that is how we think and act when these unpredictable, stressful, shitty situations come our way, because they inevitably will. Life's not perfect. It is not all sunshine and rainbows every single day. There is going to be a lot of hard stuff that comes. And one of the biggest skills we can have is the ability to face that stress head on and manage it in a really productive, meaningful way instead of just getting stuck marinating in the shittiness of it all. This week, we are diving into part 2 of the emotional fitness series, Strength Training for Your Mind. The goal of this episode is to focus on mastering stress. We are going to be talking about 3 main topics today: resilience, stress training, and improving your confidence. I'm going to be diving into some personal stories and some research-backed strategies that you can implement today to help improve the way that you manage stress and to help better prepare yourself for when those really tough, difficult moments come your way. All right, ready to get into it? Welcome to the Mindset Gym podcast, where we exercise your way of thinking to help unlock your hidden potential. I'm your host, Emily Irwin, a registered nurse and holistic nutritionist with a passion for all things health, fitness, and personal development. All right, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to the Mindset Gym podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today is part 2 of the emotional fitness series. If you haven't watched the first part of this series, I recommend that you go and do that, but it's okay if you watch them out of order. You don't have to go back and watch the first one for this one to make sense, but they do all tie together. The overarching goal of this entire series is to show you that there are so many aspects of our mental well-being and emotional fitness that are things that we can train and improve on, just like building muscle in the gym. These are not fixed attributes. These are not things that you either have or you don't. These are all things that you can work on and improve over time. So the focus of this week's episode is strategies to help you master stress and better prepare yourself for when those difficult times come your way. Because how prepared you are for something difficult and how able you are to take that on and manage it and think about it in a way that is going to help you move through it is going to have such a big impact on how detrimental that shitty, stressful thing is. So the first topic that I want to get into today is building resilience. What exactly is resilience, you may ask? Is like that spring inside of us that allows us to bend without breaking, to stumble without stopping, and to turn shitty stuff into opportunities for growth. Resilience is not about never falling down. Resilience is about what happens after you fall. I want you to think of resilience as your inner shock absorber for all of life's bumps and blows, to help you better take that on without it completely destroying you. It's the skill that keeps you moving forward even when everything else in life tries to push you back. I want you to imagine for a second that some sort of difficult situation in your life is something that is going to try and push you in a different direction. With resilience, you are like the spring that will bend and curve and adapt with those changes. Without it, it's like bending a pencil in half. You'll break. Resilience is such an important skill for you to build. And it's not just something that you can build in the face of crisis. It is something that you can work on ahead of time. I'm going to be talking today about a couple different perspectives on building resilience. Some that you can do in the face of really difficult stuff, and some that you can do outside of it. Now, the fact that we can build resilience in the face of really difficult things, kind of in the thick of those really awful moments in life, creates an opportunity. It means that these shitty moments that come your way and these difficult things that you're going through do have an opportunity for growth, if you're willing to look for it. Now, I know when you are in the face of something really awful, sitting there and looking for an opportunity for growth is not going to feel very easy. It's not going to feel like the thing that you want to do. And if you are in the thick of something really difficult right now, you might be hearing me say that and thinking, you know what? F off. You have no idea what I'm going through, and it's too hard for me to look for lessons right now. That's not where I'm at. And I get it. Life is hard. Life is hard. Shitty things can be really difficult to move through. It can feel really difficult to not just sit and marinate in them. But these strategies are ones that you can implement in a way that don't feel like you're trying to study for an exam in the midst of a hurricane. They are ways for you to ease into stepping through the difficult thing. Charles Hunt, in his TED Talk, What Trauma Taught Me About Resilience, talks about his childhood growing up in Oakland, living in poverty, the height of the crack epidemic, with a mother who had become addicted to drugs, and a father who was working as a pimp. He recounts a lot of the trauma that he experienced between the ages of 3 and 7. Trauma including finding his mother's boyfriend dead from an overdose, finding out that his father was being incarcerated, and subsequently finding out that his father was later killed after being jumped in prison. Despite all of the really difficult moments that Charles faced during his childhood, he was standing on this stage a stronger, more resilient person. And he said during his talk, "The worst of life couldn't get the best of me." He found a way to rise above all of these really difficult things and move through them in a way that didn't break him. He didn't let those difficult moments be the thing that defined his whole life. He talked about how he wouldn't be the success that he is today, and he wouldn't be in the headspace that he is today if it wasn't for resilience. Because resilience was the exact thing that gave him the ability to adapt and change. He discusses the notion that your beliefs impact your feelings impact your thoughts, and your thoughts impact your actions. He described building resilience by using the most powerful tool that he had, which was his own mind, and his ability to shift his beliefs about what he was going through to start that chain reaction of changing his beliefs, changing the way that he feels, changing his thoughts, and at the end of it, changing his actions. He talks about beginning by telling yourself that you are going to overcome and move through the really difficult things that have happened, not in spite of them, but because of them. He talks about cultivating a mindset that these difficult things are not his identity. And he talks about letting go of the victim mindset that he felt as a child and not carrying that into his adult life. And that learning how to let go of that victim mindset was one of the things that helped him move forward and build a life that wasn't dependent on the really traumatic events that he had gone through, and actually allowed him to adapt and thrive. And this speaks to something that we talked about actually in the previous episode about training your inner voice. The way that you talk to yourself in the midst of a really difficult situation is going to impact the way that you act, and it's going to impact the way that that difficult thing carries out through the rest of your life. Something as simple as telling yourself that you are capable of moving through this difficult thing and telling yourself that you will overcome this difficult thing can start a chain reaction of shifting your beliefs about what you're capable of taking on, and can shift the dynamic of how that difficult thing is impacting you. You get to decide how strong of a person you are. You get to decide your ability to take on something difficult. You get to decide your ability to adapt. Dr. Lucy Hone studied resilience for years. She spent time working with military veterans and subsequently working with the victims of the earthquakes that took place in Christchurch, New Zealand. Lucy talks about building strategies and working with these people with the goal of improving their resilience and trying to understand the steps that a person would need to take in order to be more resilient. Now, she talks about a moment where her entire perspective on this research changed. After researching resilience for years and implementing strategies to help improve it for other people, Lucy was placed in a situation where she was now on the other side of her research. She talks about a weekend where her and her family and a couple other families had planned on going away for a couple of days. Her 12-year-old daughter got into the car with her friend, also 12, and her friend's mother, who was a close friend of Lucy's. Shortly after this, these 3 people were in a car accident and died immediately on impact. Lucy was now faced with the challenge of mourning the loss of her 12-year-old daughter. And now, after years of working with people who had been through really difficult, really traumatic situations and helping them to build resilience, she was now the one facing the really difficult situation. She was now the one in the thick of the grieving process, trying to figure out what to do. And she talks about how this shifted her entire perspective on her research on resilience and what resources were already out there and the messaging that was currently being given to people. And she says that the resources that were available to her after losing her daughter and the messaging that was given to her, it all made her feel like a victim. And it didn't give her any sense of having any control over her own grieving process. And she didn't like that. She describes this as making her feel powerless and hopeless, like this isn't something she had any ability to manage. And so instead of just accepting it for what it was, Lucy decided to use herself as her own test subject and began working through her resilience research and implementing strategies based on what she knew to find what would work best for her. She described 3 strategies that she most heavily relied on in her darkest days, and the 3 strategies that became the underpinning of her work on resilience. Number 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They have an understanding that adversity is part of life, and an understanding that adversity does not discriminate. There can be this tendency when something really awful happens to you to say, why me? Why me out of all of these people? Why am I the one faced with this really difficult thing? And Lucy describes reframing this after she lost her daughter, that instead of asking, why me, she asked, why not me? So many people are faced with difficult situations like this. There are so many people who lose loved ones. Why not me? Adversity does not discriminate. And having this understanding that difficult things happen to everyone, you were not picked out of a lineup specifically for some really awful thing to happen to you. We all get dealt some shitty cards in our deck, and these ones happen to be yours. And having that understanding helps eliminate that victim mindset. Because getting stuck and ruminating in that kind of victim mentality that, why does it have to be me? Why am I the one with this really awful thing that no one else has to deal with? It can make you feel powerless in your ability to create any change. And it can make it feel like you have no ability to impact what is going on. You have no control to change what is going on. Whereas keeping that understanding puts you back in the driver's seat. While you may not be able to change every single thing about the difficult things that you're going through, there are some things you have control over, and this allows you to focus on those things. Which ties into the second thing that Lucy talked about. The second strategy that Lucy discusses is that resilient people are very good at selectively choosing where they place their attention. This ties into a common quote that I think we've probably all heard, which is focus on the things that you can change and accept the things that you can't. When you're faced with a difficult situation, there can be a lot of really negative parts of that situation that feel like you have no control over changing them. And you may not. There may be quite a few parts of what you're going through that you can't actually change. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can change. And being willing to selectively place your attention and look for the things that you can impact, look for the small things that you are able to adapt in order to improve your quality of life, in order to help you heal and move through this in a really constructive way. And it takes consistent practice. In a previous episode, I talked about our negativity bias and how we have a stronger tendency to focus on the negative and get really stuck on that. Because years and years ago, that was beneficial for our survival. That was advantageous for us to put more focus and more emphasis on the negative. And so especially when we are faced with a traumatic, life-altering situation, it can be really difficult to not just focus on the really awful, unchangeable parts of that situation and dwell on the fact that you have no ability to make it better. It is a continuous practice. Start to look for the small things that you have the ability to control. And this is something that you can practice with or without a crisis. You don't have to wait for things to be really bad to start focusing on this skill. This is a skill that you can do anytime. In your day-to-day life, make it a continuous practice to focus on what you have the ability to change and to focus on little positive moments, focus on moments of opportunity, focus on where you might be able to learn something, and implement it in all those kind of smaller bumps along the road so that when you do face a really huge obstacle, you've already kind of built that skill. Your brain is already wired in a way that it knows to start seeking out these things. It knows to start looking for the things that you have control over, because that's what you've been doing all along. You have trained it to seek those things out, and you will be better equipped to handle the really big obstacles if you implement this with all the small ones. I'll give you a couple examples of this. Let's say you face some kind of minor bumps in the road. You get some feedback from work that doesn't make you feel particularly good. You didn't get fired. It's nothing major. But maybe your boss had to come to you and say, hey, here's some feedback on this thing that you did that maybe you could do a little bit better. And your ego took a bit of a hit. What can you look for in that situation that you have control to change? You could sit and wallow in it and tear yourself apart and make yourself feel wrong and start tearing apart your boss and tearing apart your job and making it feel like, well, I'm just in this shitty job with a boss who doesn't understand me. Or you could look for the opportunity and look for the things that you can control. You can control how you let that feedback impact you. You can control how you behave going forward based on that feedback. You can control how you communicate with your boss in response to that. There are so many things that you can control in that situation. I'll give you another example. Let's say you come home from work and your dog or your young child has made a huge mess of your house. Let's say your kid got into a can of paint, which I've seen a whole lot of videos of. This can be a huge disaster. Or let's say your dog got a little bit pissed off and took to the couch cushions and ripped them apart, or broke one of your doors because they were trying to get out of a room. That's really frustrating. That's a really shitty bump in your day. While you can't go back in time and erase the fact that they destroyed these things or made this big mess of your house, you do have control over how you let it affect your mood for the rest of the day. You have control over how you discipline them and communicate with them. You have control over your own thoughts and feelings about it. So take those smaller bumps and use them as practice. Use them as practice to be selective with your attention and start placing your attention in the places where it is going to make the biggest difference for you. Lucy talks about something that she did to help with this quite a bit, and this was using gratitude. And gratitude is something we can implement any time. Lucy would focus on gratitude in this really shitty situation in order to help reframe her mindset and make a really awful situation feel a little bit better to digest. She gave an example of this. So her daughter was killed in a car accident, and something she would say to herself as kind of a gratitude practice that made her feel a little bit better was, I'm grateful that this was the way that my daughter passed and not by some long drawn out illness that she had to suffer through. And while that doesn't make the fact that she lost her daughter okay, it makes it a little bit easier to digest. And she would continuously look for small things in this situation to be grateful for, despite it being really hard, despite it being really shitty. Because if you look hard enough, there's always something you can pick out and be grateful for. Maybe despite all of the really hard things that are going on, you had a really good day today. Maybe the weather's really beautiful outside. Maybe you had a really great interaction with someone. Maybe you now have the opportunity to shift your life in a direction that is more meaningful to you. And again, similarly to practicing placing your attention on the things that you can control, this is a practice that you can implement before there's a crisis. On any given day, having some sort of gratitude practice can be a really helpful way to start shifting your mindset and start programming your brain to seek out the things to be grateful for. Some easy ways to do this is, starting the morning with a question like, what are 3 things I'm grateful for? And just writing them down every morning. Or you can do what I do. I use an app specifically for this. It's a journaling app. It's called Gratitude. I'll put the icon up if you're watching the video on YouTube, but it gives you different prompts every morning, and they're designed as journal prompts, but they are worded in a way that prompts you to practice gratitude. It will ask questions like, what are you grateful for about X? What are you grateful for about your ability to do this? What is an experience that you've had under this umbrella that you're grateful for recently? Who is someone that you're grateful for and why? And it will give you prompts like this every day, and then you get to type in a journal entry about why you're grateful for these things. And having some sort of small practice like this will help rewire your brain so it is primed to seek out those things. So even in the face of something really difficult, your brain already has that habit to start seeking out things that it's grateful for, and it will continue to do that even when things are really hard. The third strategy that Dr. Lucy talks about is asking yourself this question: is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? And this was a question she would ask herself constantly. So with anything she was doing throughout the day, she would be mindful to stop and take a minute and ask herself, is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? An example she gave of this is after losing her daughter, one night she was sitting up late at night, scrolling through a bunch of old pictures of her daughter and getting really upset by it. And she stopped and said, is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? And that helped her come to the conclusion that what she was doing was actually not making her feel very good. And it was actually harming her more than helping her. And that was kind of the prompt she needed to put those photos away and go to bed. And again, this is something you can ask yourself all the time. You don't have to wait for a crisis to start implementing this question into your regular mindset. With everything that you are doing day to day, before you take a certain action, ask yourself that question. Is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? And once you figure out your answer, then you have the chance to decide, is it really worth continuing to take that action? If the thing that I'm choosing to do is harming me, do I really want to go forward with it? And maybe you do. And there's probably going to be times where you ask yourself that question and you do the harmful thing anyways. We're human. It's bound to happen. But making it a regular practice to ask yourself that question gives you that continuous moment of pause. It gives you that second to kind of reframe and really deeply think about what you are doing. And although it may not be 100% of the time, there will be times where you ask yourself that question and you catch yourself doing something that is really more harmful than helpful, and it will be enough prompt for you to stop. Practicing this skill ahead of time, again, will make it a lot easier to implement it in the face of something really difficult. Because you've practiced that skill, because you've built that muscle, you are already used to asking yourself that reflective question, so it will come much easier when you're in the face of something difficult. Because when we're in the face of really difficult things and we are trying to manage a lot of really negative emotions, it can be very easy for us to do a lot of things that are innately more harmful than helpful. Let's say you've just gone through a breakup and you are inclined to go and binge drink to forget about your ex and forget about all these shitty, overwhelming feelings that you're feeling. Let's say you just got fired from a job and your inclination is to go and trash your boss's house or tear your company down. Are these things helpful or are they harmful? Let's say you have a friend who said something that made you feel really shitty. You turning around and saying even more shitty things about that person to everyone else, is it helpful or is it harmful? In the midst of really shitty situations, our emotions can be a really big driver in our actions because those really difficult moments are the ones that are going to bring up way more turbulence and way more difficult feelings than anything else in our lives. And we don't like difficult feelings. Nobody wants to feel difficult feelings. And so our inclination is typically to push it away or to do some sort of action, some sort of thing to numb those feelings, push them away, or justify them in a way that's going to make us feel better instantly. We seek out that kind of instant gratification to make ourselves feel okay in the midst of something that really is not okay. And having that question in your back pocket allows you to bring a little bit of logic and a little bit of objectivity to this really emotionally charged situation. Resilience is your ability to bounce back in difficult situations, and these are strategies that we can take to make that bounce back easier and to make it easier to move through things in a way that is not going to destroy you. And several of these are things that we can practice ahead of time. This is a muscle you can build so that you are more resilient going into it. There are going to be a lot of things in the midst of a really difficult moment that will help you build resilience, and that can help foster that in you. But it is also something we can practice and cultivate ahead of time. You can prepare yourself now for things that may come down the line so that you are better equipped for it. And I want to take a moment to just differentiate between resilience and grit. While they are both important, while they are both very helpful in getting you through really difficult situations, they're not the same thing. Grit is kind of that sense of sucking it up and pushing through it and forcing yourself through it, no matter how shitty it feels. And kind of pushing your emotions and your feelings on the situation to the back seat and just having that get through it mentality. Like, doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter how I do it, just get through it, just get it done. And having some of that is really good. Having that mentality can be really helpful in the midst of something really difficult. But resilience is that adaptability piece. It's your ability to not just push through it, but actually adapt and move through it in a way that will help you process it in a productive way. Emma McAdam from Therapy in a Nutshell describes resilience as a combination of toughness and flexibility. It is the intersection between those two things. It's the ability to push through hard things, but it's also the ability to be flexible and adaptable. I'm going to move on to the second topic, which is stress training. Stress is a really big word. There is so many different ways that we can experience stress. There are so many things that can happen in our life that can cause us stress. And there are two different kinds of stress. There is eustress, which is good stress, and there is distress, which is bad stress. And it can be really difficult sometimes to differentiate between the two. However, there are ways that we can use eustress or good stress in small controlled doses in order to help prep our mind and body to be able to better take on stress and manage it. And this creates a situation where we are more primed to take on stress so that when we face those moments of distress, we're better equipped to handle it. So this kind of goes hand in hand with building resilience. And this is a practice that I want to talk about. And the intention of this kind of practice is to expose yourself to small bits of controlled stress on a regular basis. And we do this intentionally because it allows us to build that muscle of stress tolerance. We can implement small controlled periods of stress by doing things like cold exposure, by doing things like working out, by doing things like public speaking, by forcing ourselves to have an uncomfortable conversation, by doing a technology detox, by waking up a little bit earlier than you're used to. All of these tiny little things, they are things that are uncomfortable enough, just enough to cause a little bit of stress, but not so much that it is, going to fuck up your whole day. It's not detrimental to your life. In fact, some of these things can be a little bit helpful, but it introduces just a small amount of stress. And you being willing to repeatedly do those things allows you to be better equipped to take on bigger stress because you've trained that muscle. You have trained your brain and you have trained your body to take on some amount of stress and adapt to it and understand that, things are going to be okay. And you create a situation where when you're faced with stressful moments, you don't just survive them, you thrive. Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote the book Antifragile. And in this, he talks about the notion of antifragile, in which there are things that are fragile, where stressful situations and adversity will break them. And there's resilient, where you are robust and you are able to take on stress. And then he talks about this third category, which is anti-fragile, in which things don't just survive stress. They don't just get through it. They actually get stronger because of it. Some examples of this can include your muscles. When you go into the gym and you lift weights, you create small tears and your muscles face a little bit of stress, but because of that stress, they repair themselves and they come back stronger. Your immune system is another example of this. When you are faced with a minor illness, let's say you get a cold or a flu one season, that's a little bit of stress. Your immune system then takes that on and will adapt and grow so that next time around when you're faced with the same virus, you're better equipped to manage it and it won't make you sick the way that it did the first time around. So it didn't just survive, you didn't just get through it, you're stronger because of it. Another example could be a business that is adaptable and flexible, and anytime it is faced with a crisis, it finds a way to adapt and continue to progress. And it didn't just survive that. It's not the same company that it was before. It's stronger and more robust because of it. So instead of thinking of stress as this purely negative, purely awful kind of thing, I want you to start reframing your thinking around it. I want you to think of stress as feedback. Stress is good data. It'll tell you a few things. It will tell you what your upper limits are, what your priorities are, and it'll tell you if you have skills that you need to develop. So I want you to find ways to implement small amounts of stress in your day-to-day routine. I want you to purposely create small moments of stress because it's not this big detrimental thing. You don't have to, blow up your whole life and create a major stressful impact. You can just do little small things, and those things will better equip you. I'll give you an example from my own life. So I've talked about this before on the show, but for several years now, I have started every single morning, as soon as I get up, by taking a cold shower. And it's shitty, it's uncomfortable, it is stress. It is every single morning I am exposing myself to a small amount of stress. But because I have done that, because I have made that a regular practice and a staple in my morning routine, I have found that I am better equipped to take on stress since starting that habit. So when more stressful things happen in my day-to-day life, something that is more detrimental and more stressful than immersing myself in cold water, I'm actually better equipped to take it on. Because what happens when I turn that cold shower on in the morning and I'm hit with that cold water, I immediately have this moment of feeling stress and needing to adapt. You're immediately freezing cold, but you take a deep breath and you find a way to calm yourself and sit through it. And you focus on the benefits of it. And in doing that practice every morning, I get this continuous moment of learning how to take on stress and adapt. And so now my ability to do that in bigger situations is more robust than it would have been otherwise. Even though me taking a cold shower doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the bigger stressful things, it's not the same source of stress as something really big and detrimental later on in my life, but it's that same muscle. It's that same skill of being able to take on stress and adapt that I have built and cultivated over time that translates into bigger situations. So this is how I want you to implement stress training. Find small ways to introduce stress into your life. And it doesn't have to be major. It could be as simple as telling the waitress when they got your order wrong, if that's something that typically brings you a whole lot of anxiety and you would avoid doing. Or telling somebody how you really feel instead of keeping quiet just to avoid conflict. Or try something new. Maybe take a class. Do something that you have never done to get yourself out of your comfort zone. It'll create a little small moment of stress. But you'll learn in doing so that you're capable of managing stress. And it's not as bad as you make it out to be. And you can also take advantage of small moments of stress as a practice in managing your mindset and practicing patience. Some examples of this can include having to stand in a really long line or being stuck in traffic. These little small moments of stress that aren't really detrimental, but they're aggravating and they're enough to produce some negative emotions. Use those small moments as an opportunity to stop and actively shift your mindset and try to look for ways to move through it in a way that's not going to make you feel shitty, and look for ways to manage the negative emotions that are coming up. Because something like being stuck in traffic, it's going to trigger negative emotions, anger, frustration, anxiety, all of these things that we may feel on a grander scale when we're faced with a more detrimental, more traumatic, stressful situation. This is your moment to take those on and learn how to manage them and practice learning how to manage them, because That small amount of anger and that small amount of stress that you feel by being stuck in traffic is going to be a little bit easier for you to pick apart and manage than the anger and stress of going through a divorce or getting fired or getting a really detrimental health diagnosis. Those smaller moments are your opportunity to practice managing those feelings. All right. The third pillar of this episode, building confidence. Now, I've done a whole episode on building confidence in the past, and if you want more of a deep dive into that one thing, you can go back to episode 4 of the Mindset Gym podcast where we specifically talk about confidence. But anyways, on top of that, I'm going to dive more into the topic today, so you can actually listen to them both and get a little bit of a more comprehensive overview on how to build confidence. And the thing I want to start with is by pointing out that confidence is not a trait. It is not a personality trait. You do not have confidence or you don't. It is not this fixed attribute that you were either born with or you're not. Confidence is a skill. Confidence is a skill, okay? It is something you can build. It is something you can progress. It is something that you have to practice, just like any other skill. So how can we practice this? What are some steps that we can take to improve our confidence? One of the most powerful ways that we can improve our confidence is through what I want to call mastery experiences, which is actually doing the thing that you're afraid of and succeeding, even if it's in really small steps. This idea comes from scientist Albert Bandura and his self-efficacy theory. Bandura found that our belief in our ability to succeed at a task, or our self-efficacy, was the single greatest predictor of our confidence. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because you don't build confidence by thinking about being confident. You build confidence by putting in the reps, by failing, and by gradually getting better. You build confidence by actually doing the thing and getting a little better at it over time. Every time that you show up and you practice doing a thing, even if you don't do it perfectly, even if you royally fuck it up, you get a little better every time and you learn a little bit, and every little bit of improvement, every little bit of experience, every little lesson that you take away, every time you fail at something and you adapt and you come back a little bit better, you're creating little bits of proof in your mind that you can do this. You've created a narrative that you are capable of taking this on. So if you want to build confidence in any area, you're not going to build confidence by thinking about it. When I started this podcast, me sitting around and thinking about starting a podcast was not going to make me feel more confident podcasting. What made me feel more confident was actually sitting down and fumbling my way through the first few episodes and practicing speaking on camera and doing the things and failing at it and learning and trying to get a little bit better. And every time I come back and do those things, I gain a little bit more confidence because I gain a little bit more proof that this is something I'm capable of. So if there's something that you are wanting to do that you don't feel confident in right now, maybe it's painting, maybe it's running, maybe it's posting on social media, maybe it's public speaking, whatever it is, take small steps to practice that thing. Track your progress, do a little bit more every time, look for ways that you can fail, look for ways that you can learn, and let every single small win of that process add up, because it will. And it will continue to lay the bricks of that foundation of proof that'll tell you that you are capable of doing that thing. The next thing that I want you to do in order to improve your confidence is implementing a growth mindset. And this notion comes from the work of Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck developed the idea of a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is a mindset that says, I'm either good at this or I'm not. I'm either confident or I'm not. Whereas a growth mindset says, I can improve on this thing with practice. Her research showed that people who have a growth mindset don't lose confidence when they fail. If you have a fixed mindset and you think that you are either good at something or you're not, the first time that you encounter failure, that becomes proof that you are not capable and can instantly be a situation that shatters your confidence and can be a situation that will prompt you to quit. Whereas coming into it with a growth mindset allows you to see failure as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to learn. And it makes it much easier for you to move through setbacks because your identity is not tied to perfection. Your identity is tied to learning. And when learning is the goal, when getting a little better each time is the goal, as opposed to being perfect the first time around, that process becomes way easier to move through. And it becomes a lot easier for you to maintain confidence in what you're doing. Because when the goal is learning, you making a mistake on whatever you're trying to do doesn't mean you failed. It just means you're learning, which is actually a success. So the next time you are faced with a challenge or you are trying something new and you fail or you make a mistake, I want you to remind yourself that this is a chance for you to grow. It is not a verdict on your ability. It is not the end all be all on what you are capable of doing. You are capable of progressing with these things. The amount of skill and ability that you have in one thing right now is not fixed. That's not the end of the road. You're capable of getting better. The next thing I want to talk about is cognitive reframing and self-talk. And again, this ties into the previous discussion we had about improving our self-talk and previous episodes I've done about improving our self-talk, but this is such a wide umbrella. This has so many far-reaching effects on so many different things, our confidence included. How we talk to ourselves when we are faced with challenges, when we make mistakes, when we're trying something new, how we talk to ourselves is going to make such a huge difference. If you are someone who is very negative and your inner dialogue is one that kind of chips away at you and beats you down and belittles you, that is going to slowly tear apart your confidence. However, if you are willing to put in the work to slowly shift that inner dialogue and reframe it in a way that builds you up, instead of tearing your confidence down, it will reconstruct it. An example of how you can implement this is if you are faced with a situation where you don't feel confident, you're about to do something that you don't normally do. Let's say you're about to go give a speech on stage and you don't feel very confident in your ability to public speak. You don't do it often. You don't think you're very good at it. Instead of going into it with a mindset of, I'm going to fuck this up, I'm a failure, I'm no good at this, tell yourself something more along the lines of, I might be nervous, but I'm prepared and I'm capable. And if something like that is too hard, you can start with smaller steps. This is something we've talked about before as it relates to improving your inner dialogue is I don't want you to create pie in the sky nonsense statements that you don't really believe. So you going into a situation like that and saying something like, I'm the best public speaker in the world, that doesn't mean anything to you. That is something that you will hear and think, well, that's bullshit. I know that I'm not. And me telling myself that doesn't make me feel any better. It doesn't feel like something that's believable. And it really doesn't help me. Instead, what you can do is reframe your self-talk in a way that is believable, is realistic, but is helpful. So an example in that same situation could be, I have prepared to the best of my ability. And even if I make mistakes, that's okay. That gives me a chance to learn and do a little bit better next time. Allow yourself that space for grace, allow yourself that space for compassion, and try to approach it from a lens of learning to grow and learning to understand instead of just immediately tearing yourself down. The next thing that we can do to actually improve our confidence in certain situations, and this kind of it maybe goes against the thing that I said that you don't feel confident by thinking about being confident. This is a way we can implement this thing that can actually help our confidence without us doing the actual thing. And this is visualization and mental rehearsal. This is a strategy that elite athletes use all the time. And this is the practice of vividly imagining yourself in the position of doing the thing that you want. So for elite athletes, for example, let's say you are someone who is training for the Olympics, sitting down and visualizing yourself at the Olympics, doing the thing, putting yourself in that position, taking the time to really imagine what it looks like, how it feels, and piecing that whole experience together in your mind activates the same neural pathways in your brain as if you were actually doing the thing. And so this can help create a situation where you are more comfortable in that situation, you are more prepared for what that situation is going to feel like. So when you are actually in that situation, you feel more confident and you feel more prepared to take it on. The last thing I want to talk about as it relates to improving your confidence is social modeling and support. The people you surround yourself with is going to make such a big difference on your overall mindset. If you surround yourself with people who lack self-confidence and tear themselves down on a regular basis and are not willing to take on any sort of risk because they don't believe in their ability to do so, that will translate into the way that you feel. That will feed into your own mindset as well. But on the flip side, if you surround yourself with people who are working on themselves and taking risks and building their skills, your belief in yourself will expand. This notion is also supported by Albert Bandura, who found that our confidence can grow through vicarious experiences of other people's success. So if you have a social support network of people who are constantly working on themselves and who are constantly trying to be better and do better and create more for their lives, you vicariously experiencing those things through them can help improve your own belief in yourself. And this is why things like mentors and role models and supportive friends are so important in building your confidence. So in this particular area, I want you to take a little inventory. Take an inventory of the people you surround yourself with. Take an inventory of the people that you see on social media, the kind of people that you follow, the kind of circles that you put yourself in, and ask yourself what the mindsets of those people are. Are they people who try to improve themselves? Are they people who ask deeper questions? Are they people who are willing to take risks and believe in their ability to take new challenges on? Or are they people who are constantly stuck in this kind of self-deprecating mindset? Are they never willing to take on challenges because they don't believe in their ability to do so? Are they someone who thinks really small and isn't willing to look for anything beyond themselves and isn't willing to take any sort of risks and tears themselves down or tears other people down? And while it may not be possible to take all of those people and get them out of your life, some of them may be people that you have to keep around, and that's okay. You don't have to have 100% supportive, risk-taking, confident people around you, but seek out situations in which you can include them. Maybe it's finding a mentor. Maybe it's getting a life coach. Maybe it's curating a social media feed that is full of people taking risks and improving themselves and doing things that you hope to do one day. Maybe it's reading more books from people that you look up to. Maybe it's listening to podcasts from people that you look up to and looking to learn from them and looking to learn from their mindset. You can create an environment to help foster your own growth and to help foster your own confidence. So those are our 3 topics for today: building resilience, stress training, and building confidence. Next week, we are going to be diving into part 3 of the emotional fitness series, which is flexibility and recovery. In that episode, we are going to be diving into 3 more topics, which include emotional flexibility, rest and reset, and using gratitude as recovery. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you next week. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. If you like the episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share the show with a friend. Your support helps this show reach even more incredible people just like you. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time at the Mindset Gym.